I remembered my YouTube password, which means I'm actually able to upload again. Just kidding. I use an offline GPG encrypted password manager, and it's like 20 random characters anyways, so I don't memorize that. But anyways, if you're a student, you write a lot of documents, if you really like LaTeX, boy do I have something for you. It's called Typist, and if you don't know about it, you should probably learn right now. It's a crisp day in Atlanta, but we're outside anyways. I really enjoy the colder months, but let's get straight into it. The Typist video. First of all, this is pronounced typist like the profession, like somebody who types. This used to be a profession. It's not tipst, typest, or whatever. But what is typist? So these are going to be the contents of the video. You can jump around if you want, but these are the main things I'm going to be hitting. But first of all, what is typist? I think the best person to ask is the website itself, typst.app. The new foundation for documents, it calls itself. So what actually differentiates this from LaTeX? Why would you actually want to switch this? Honestly, the first thing that caught my attention is you scroll down here and you just look at the markup syntax, and it's like, that almost looks like markdown with how simple it is. And then you do math here. There's not a bunch of backslashes everywhere, and it renders into nice, clean math. And there's also a lot of other stuff. We're going to get all into it. But first of all, it can do almost everything you would want from LaTeX. First of all, let's look at some math. Spoiler alert, this presentation is actually also in Typist. So I can make that a little smaller, put that up there, and we can actually look at the presentation itself. Look, I can even add a bullet point here. Hello. It will just render in there. That's great. So let's look at some math. If you've ever taken a math class or discrete math, you probably find yourself typing a bunch of symbols, and you've probably written something like, for all x, ax implies bx. Look how clean this is over here. That arrow is just like a hyphen and a greater than symbol. I use nerd fonts, so it renders nicely in Vim. But anyways, that's how easy it is. In actual LaTeX, that right arrow, sometimes you'd be backslash, lowercase r right arrow, or backslash 2. And your pinky gets really tired hitting these backslashes all the time. Or even here, as expression 1, can expression 1 reduce down to expression 2? You have that equals and greater than syntax. And I promise Typist is not just syntactic sugar, but the syntactic sugar is really good if you find yourself writing a lot of Typist, especially if you're trying to define sets, set notation. Let's say the set even is defined as all x such that x over 2 is in the set of all integers. So squirrely braces in LaTeX are actually part of the syntax. So that means if you want to use it in a set builder notation, you actually have to escape every single time. So it would be backslash and then the squirrely brace, and then backslash again for the squirrely brace. And if you're writing a lot of those, or nested expressions, that can get very annoying because very quickly you're just not going to escape one of your squirrely braces, and then the compiler yells at you. This expression right here of LaTeX, I can type it about as quick as I can say it. And so that's incredible for me, especially if you want to take a bunch of quick math notes and everything else. Also, this is fun. 0, 0 to mean infinity. In LaTeX, it's usually inft, which is weird. Not INF, not infinity. I think backslash infinity might work, but inft is what you see a lot. That's a little silly. But when you look at all the symbols of LaTeX, not lots, when you look at all the symbols of Typist, general symbols are here. They have pretty much everything you need. And also, these symbols are subtypable. One thing in LaTeX that also gets goofy is that if you want a double arrow, it would be capital R right arrow, or a single arrow, it's lowercase r right arrow. None of that stuff here. The things are actually subtypable, so you can have angle dot acute or angle dot arc. So I think it's just a lot more internally consistent, a lot more discoverable in that way. That's oh, what are the subtypes of this thing? It's I can have equal, but equal dot not, or something like this. And so that's all great. I even have some old math assignments I did. And you look at the LaTeX syntax right here, and I don't know if it's just me, but when I squint my eyes, I'm just scrolling through a document, it's really hard not to read any of these words of the right arrow and the frac and everything else when I'm trying to find where in the document this math exists. But you look at the syntax, and we're all probably familiar with this if you're watching this long into the video. And you compare that to Typist syntax, where, let me go here, this is another document. Also, don't look too closely if any of this is correct. I don't even remember these classes. But anyways, You look at the syntax here of like products and like things canceling, and then you even have the set in the end and the squirrely braces. And this is like as clean as it can get. Like I cannot imagine. I think you can even, instead of product, maybe you can also do capital P pi. I'm not sure, but that's fantastic. This is excellent. So going back into it, it has almost everything you would want from LaTeX, and then some. Hello, me from the future. I skipped this bullet point when I originally filmed, but I just wanted to say that, like, if you're writing conference papers, something like IEEE, you can also do that just fine. This is something I wrote once upon a time, able to have all my figures the way I like and your citations at the end. It just reads a refs.bib, probably the way you're used to. There's a package in Typest, I believe the one I used is charged IEEE, and you can just import it into your document, define it here, write your abstract, authors, whatever. It's great. So if you're preparing for a conference, I suggest looking into Typest. Let's talk about what that and then some is. Typest, I think, is best conceptualized as a trinity. You know what I mean? There's Typest, the compiler, there's Typest, the formatting language, the .type, and then there's a website, typst.app, and everything that it brings. And all of these things are Typest. All of these things come with it when you decide to step foot into the Typest ecosystem that maybe something LaTeX or Markdown or all these other things don't have. And so let's talk about that. Some of the Typest niceties. It has a very robust scripting language that puts the LaTeX macros to shame. So I can go into the scripting section of their wiki, and you can write like actual code here that can run at the time of like the compilation of your document, do a lot of conditionals and for loops. And also the compiler itself is written in Rust, so it's like super, super quick when you're making changes to your document and you actually want that reflected. And so the scripting language is really cool. Also, typest.app can have collaborative editing. If I go straight into Typest, try it for yourself. It'll pop me straight into a document that I can send a link to my friends. It's just like Overleaf, if you've ever used that for LaTeX. Your friends hop in, collaborative editing, it's all nice. You can share documents. That's not necessarily unique to Typest, but it's all unified into like the typest.app and all the ecosystem to where there's not all these like branches or variations. It's all like baked into the cake when you get it. And so that's really cool. Going next, presentations. Obviously, like the one you're seeing now, you can use it to define presentations, show it in PDF form, and you also get the same like collaborative editing that you would get from like the Microsoft or the Google suite where people can edit at the same time. The only thing is you're obviously limited by PDF, you know, so if you really like your transitions, of it popping out like a cube and rotating and then coming back in, then I'm sorry. But I think this is just fine enough. It's worked fine for me. I've given like real presentations using the Typest format. Here's a cool thing. Writing documentation in code, because right now Markdown is kind of the standard, which is funny because Markdown is not a standard. We're going to get into there later. But look, you can write code in Typest. And I believe even my text editor, look, it even like colors it correctly. It even knows to color Python correctly and everything else in that code block. So you can have instructions written down as simple as this. This is as simple as Markdown, but also have like a really good way to turn it into a PDF to send like a boss or something. Because, you know, if your boss is like, oh, how do I do this? And maybe he's like a boomer and he's not used to like looking at like text files. You can print it out really nice, style it, give it into a PDF that has all the same like install instructions that you would have otherwise. And also, I think your eyes kind of get tired looking at monospace all day. But you can also put like, for example, here's how you write a shell command. There are like a couple of ways to do this. You can either have a code block and define the language as like sh. You could do this inline with the raw syntax and put lang as sh. Or if you don't really want the like syntax highlighting, you can just put them in tax. And that'll also look very nice. You can also get pretty fancy with this. Some people have done crazy stuff. Like, yeah, so this is one project where actually all of their documentation is written into Typest and then even converted to Markdown when to post on the GitHub. So you have like the isMD target, and again, you have this robust scripting language to where you're like just able to do that kind of stuff. And so then when you actually look at the documentation, it looks really good because it's in the GitHub format, because GitHub, you know, for now really wants Markdown. There's also this other guy that had it like auto detect whether or not your browser was in dark mode and then serve you different rendered HTML or whatever as a result. And that's crazy. Like I thought this was really cool. But of course, there are limitations. A lot of these solutions that these people are using for now feel a little bit hacky, especially when it's showing a README on GitHub. And that's just a big question about maturity of the project. That's one of those things that like can get better with time. But the fundamentals of what Typist is, I think, is a really, really good idea. So that's the obvious question. Like, what is the problem with Markdown for documentation? Like, are you using the wrong tool for the wrong job? And the problem is with Markdown is it's not too different than a TXT. There's a large ecosystem of all these like extensions to the format. It's like R Markdown and Google's format, because the strict Markdown spec is just like a style guide of how like the document should look like, but it's still basically text. So if you want fancy things like having an HTML element or even having an image where you can define, like you can write an image in Markdown syntax, but it's like, how do I define how wide that should be? And that's actually sometimes an open-ended question. And so it's really annoying. I just find the ecosystem to be a little bit convoluted, whereas like Typist, I think, is this much more powerful engine that even when you're looking at its like base syntax of like, I just want to have a list of instructions, bullet points, whatever, but also render it nicely if I want to. That's really good, because you can have all your documentation be greppable. You can like search for it all in the command line and all that. And you can import a common styling format. So like if you're, say, a business and you have all your internal documentation in text format, so you can easily search through it, you can also publish it in like a PDF format, again, using like include our common style sheet, whatever, to have it all be a consistent format. That also means if you update your company format, you don't need to suddenly go through all these old Google Docs or old whatever. And I don't even know how people do it. Imagine if your job is just like going through like Microsoft Word documents all day. I feel for those people. But again, you really have to think of the Typist trinity, that it comes with like the format and the compiler and the website all baked in together. Now, the thing that gets me the most excited about Typist is static site generation. If you don't know what I mean, there's certain static site generators like Hugo or whatever. It's where you define your document in Markdown in one of these like text documents, and then it will just like render it for you, style it, and put it all on your website, so you don't have to like write manual HTML all day. Having this built into the Typist ecosystem and getting all the benefits of like the scripting and everything else, I think has a potential to be very powerful. Now, I must say, this is still like in early stages, so there's a lot that is still not supported, but it's good enough. I was working on this little side project to where I was able to get a wiki-like thing going. This document here, I actually wrote in Typist. So let me open that for a second, like the bird article, for example. This is just like I can define figures, give it captions, give it section titles, all the things that you'd want to do. And then I actually have a compiler hook that is then able to convert it to HTML. And the most important thing is generate slugs automatically. So I can click this and go into that. And this is also a Rust program that I wrote to extend part of the functionality of the Typist compiler called typessg, where I'm not going to like walk through the entire code. This is on my GitHub if you want to see it, but it ingests a Typist document and generates two different files. So it will generate an article.html, which is all the good stuff you saw there. I can close out the presentation now. That was the last slide. But it will also give an outline. So this is really cool that all the bindings of the Typist compiler is just out there. So I can like write some Rust, because Typist itself is written in Rust, and extend it and have it to be able to generate these things automatically. So you see like early evolution was just something that I originally wrote as a section header. Like early evolution. I'm not even like defining what the slug is, but it will generate the slug and then put it in another thing and then be able to be like put together with the web server onto the website. That's really, really cool. And I can do all the things like, click into animal. So what's an animal? Click into bear. What's a bear? It has most of the things you'd want. I did this little project during Typist 13. The best thing about Typist is there's a new feature every day. So Typist 14 came out, And it also supports all the things that you would use in research, like, the bibliography and everything else, citations. It'll also include like works cited. It's still working on a lot of the math stuff, but math is another thing that if you've worked with like HTML math, most people use, I believe it's called MathJax, or if you even look at like Math Stack Exchange or these math websites that you would think that they do it the correct way. They actually do it the worst way imaginable. Rendering math, it should be a solved problem for how to statically do that in the browser. For the uninitiated, if you even go to like Math Exchange or these websites, every single time you log into the site, you will see it first rendered in like the LaTeX format, and then half a second later, it will then switch to the actual like rendered HTML. And you go like, wait a minute. If the content of this site is not changing, if the forum is not changing, why is it re-rendering the HTML each time? And it's like, well, server-side HTML rendering is apparently like a hard problem for people to do, or if it is, they're just not implementing it correctly. I don't even know. But anyways, using Typest, you now have built in like a typist to HTML with math, such that like all of your figures and everything else can exist in the DOM, exist in the HTML engine, which is just a lot better than having it as images for a number of reasons. People use custom like style JSs